My significant other, 30 years old, got me, 30 years old, an espresso machine for my birthday, which I have been wanting for many years. On my birthday, he was so excited he started opening the unwrapped. Not that this matters, but just clarifying that he didn't unwrap anything. Espresso machine before I even had a chance to. And I had to gently joke, remind him that I would like to unbox it myself. Yesterday was the first day that we used the machine. I was excited to use it and made a few drinks for us, and he made one too. He kept offering to make me a latte, and I had to remind him that I would like to try it out since I just got it. Today I woke up and went to use it, finding a mess of coffee grinds and water all over the counter and accessories. I know he had an appointment to get to, and he took the dogs out so I could sleep in. I cleaned up the mess and made my coffee. As I'm steaming the milk, he asked me if I filled the milk to the line and reminds me there is a max and minimum line on the cup and that it looks overfilled. Not going to lie, I got annoyed at this as I used it multiple times yesterday, and he saw me reading the directions. I feel like he talks to me like I'm dumb or a child. Like because he used it once he is the expert, even though I made him a latte yesterday, and we have had the machine for the same amount of time. I have also used my mom's espresso machine and steamed milk on it, whereas he has never done that before. Also, I don't go up to him when he's cooking and ask if he knows how to turn on the oven and if he knows there are different temperatures. It just feels condescending. When he came home, he made himself another coffee. I go to make my second drink, and again there is a mess of grinds and water everywhere. I became frustrated because it's my second day with this new gift, and I want to be able to use it without having to clean up after him. He was in the restroom when I found the mess, so I texted him, "I would really appreciate it if you cleaned up after yourself. I already cleaned up the ground coffee and water after you left this morning. If this is going to be another area that I have to clean up after you use it, then you're not allowed to use it." I feel like I have to come behind him a lot to keep stuff tidy as he has attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Now for an update. We got into a heated argument because he started getting defensive, saying I didn't give him a chance to clean it, and I should be nicer with my approach as I cause him to be defensive. I feel like my stuff is always our stuff, and his stuff is his, and I'm tired of not having my stuff respected. Whenever this gets brought up, he basically says that I just have a bad case of only child syndrome. So am I the jerk for banning him from using it if he can't clean up after himself? Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1, not the idiot. I have an ADHD husband, and from my experience, you didn't give me a chance to clean it, means you didn't remember you are supposed to remind me to clean it, and then accept waiting until I feel like taking care of it. If you clean it yourself, of course, he'll have just been about to do it. My husband's one chore is doing dishes, and I finally broke and did the mountain that was piled in the sink and on the counter today. Funny enough, because I needed to clean my espresso machine out since he never does it. I fully expect to get fussed at when he sees it tonight. Also, it sounds like he used your interest in an espresso machine to buy himself a gift. You're not the AH for reminding him that this was presented as a gift for you, and you would like to be able to use it without having to clean up after him first. It's basic respect for property. Comment 2, not the idiot. He's shining you on. You didn't give him a chance to clean it, and he turns it around and makes himself the victim. Yeah, don't let him get away with that. Bring him back to the point and reiterate that you need him to clean up his own messes right away. The "he was getting to it" excuse is BS. It is unfair to force you to either live in the mess he leaves behind or clean it yourself. Don't know if this is your hill to die on OP, but in my experience, slobs rarely reform. Now for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for reading. So after that argument about the espresso machine, things have been pretty tense between us. For the first few days, he didn't touch the machine at all, which I thought was a good sign. Maybe he was finally respecting my space. But then about a week later, I noticed he started using it again. This time, he was more careful, but there were still little messes here and there. I didn't want to start another fight, so I just cleaned up quietly. One morning, I woke up to find the machine completely disassembled. He had taken it apart to clean it thoroughly, which was a nice gesture, but he left all the parts scattered across the counter. I had to put it back together before I could make my coffee. When I asked him about it, he said he was trying to help and that I should appreciate his effort. I didn't want to argue, so I just nodded and let it go. A few days later, we had some friends over for dinner. He proudly showed off the espresso machine and made everyone lattes. I felt a bit sidelined, but I didn't want to make a scene in front of our friends. After they left, I told him how I felt, and he got defensive again. He said I was being possessive, and that I should be happy he's taking an interest in something I love. I didn't know how to respond, so I just went to bed. The next morning, I found a note on the counter. It was from him, apologizing for the mess and promising to be more careful. He also mentioned that he had scheduled an appointment with a therapist to work on his ADHD and our communication issues. I was touched by his effort and decided to give him another chance. For the next couple of weeks, things were better. He was more mindful of cleaning up after himself, and we even started making coffee together. It felt like we were finally on the same page. But then, one evening, I came home to find the machine missing. I panicked and called him, thinking it had been stolen. He calmly explained that he had taken it to a repair shop because it wasn't working properly. I was relieved, but also annoyed that he hadn't told me beforehand. When he brought the machine back, it was working perfectly, and he had even bought some new accessories for it. I appreciated the gesture, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was trying to take over something that was supposed to be mine. I decided to talk to him about it again, but this time, I wanted to approach it differently. I sat him down and explained how I felt, not just about the espresso machine, but about our relationship in general. I told him I felt like my boundaries weren't being respected and that I needed him to understand how important this was to me. He listened quietly and then admitted that he had been struggling with his own feelings of inadequacy. He said he wanted to share my interest to feel closer to me, but realized he had gone about it the wrong way. We decided to set some ground rules. He would clean up after himself, and I would let him know if something bothered me without getting angry. We also agreed to find a hobby we could both enjoy together, so it didn't feel like we were competing for space. Things were going well until last weekend. We were at a family gathering, and my mom mentioned how much I loved her old espresso machine. My significant other made a joke about how he was the espresso king now, and everyone laughed. I felt a pang of irritation, but brushed it off. Later that night, I overheard him talking to my mom about how he wanted to buy a more advanced machine for us. My heart sank. It felt like he was trying to take over again. When we got home, I confronted him about it. He said he just wanted to make me happy and thought a better machine would do that. I told him it wasn't about the machine. It was about feeling like my interests were being overshadowed. He apologized and said he didn't realize how much it meant to me. The next day, he surprised me with a small gift, a set of personalized coffee mugs with our names on them. It was a sweet gesture and I appreciated it, but I couldn't help but wonder if this was just another way for him to insert himself into my space. As the month went on, I noticed he was making a real effort to respect my boundaries. He even started cleaning up more around the house, not just the coffee area. It felt like we were finally finding a balance. But then something happened that tested everything. One evening, I came home to find him sitting at the kitchen table with a letter in his hand. He looked upset, and I asked him what was wrong. He handed me the letter. It was from his ex, asking to meet up and talk. He said he didn't know what to do and needed my advice. I felt a mix of emotions. On one hand, I wanted to support him, but on the other, I felt threatened. I asked him why she wanted to meet, and he said she didn't specify. I told him he needed to decide what was best for him, but deep down, I was scared of what this could mean for us. He decided to meet her, and I tried to be supportive. When he came back, he told me she wanted to apologize for how things ended and get closure. He said he realized how much he loved me and didn't want to lose what we had. I was relieved but also felt a bit insecure. This whole experience made me realize how much we both need to work on our communication and trust. We're still figuring things out, but I feel like we're on the right track. Thanks for reading. Am I the idiot for taking my son into the girls' changing room and ignoring a screaming mom? My son does swimming lessons after school. He is 4 years old and struggles to get dressed on his own after swimming. The swimming pool is not set up for families. There is a changing room with a girl's side and a boy's side attached to the pool. There is also a family changing room that is not attached to the pool and would require you to walk through the school to get to it. The family changing room is also the adult's toilet, so there is not much space in there and it is not uncommon for it to be in use. The first couple of weeks, I tried using the family changing room, and we ended up stuck waiting, then having to change in a recently used, not very clean toilet stall. With tired kids, it was just a nightmare. I have been sending both boys, 6 and 4, into the boys' changing room to get their swim stuff on. The 4-year-old can mostly do that himself, but he is just not quite there with getting dry and dressed on his own yet. So after swimming, I take him to the girls' changing room so I can help him. Usually, we end up being the last ones to go in, but today the boys were hungry and we went in pretty quickly. I was in a corner getting my kid changed when another mom started yelling at me. She wanted me to be in the boys' changing room with my son, as my son was making her daughter uncomfortable. We were doing a quick change. He wasn't running around naked. I was between him and the rest of the changing room. Her daughter was more uncomfortable with her mom yelling than my son's existence. The 6-year-old girl asked her mom to stop several times. I didn't respond to her much because I'm not super confrontational. I just focused on getting him changed and letting him know he was okay. She started yelling louder that she didn't consent for her daughter to see that. I got annoyed at this point and said, "She doesn't have to look." I know this didn't help, but I was getting frustrated. After that, I mostly didn't engage as she kept berating me and my son. I just got him dressed and out as quickly as possible. Now for an update, I am now second-guessing myself. I don't understand why it would be better for an adult to be in the wrong gender changing room than a prepubescent kid. That's what she wanted. If I had been a dad with a daughter, she would have been apoplectic. If she had spoken to me calmly and politely, I would have engaged with her, but her reaction felt over the top, especially in front of the kids, so I didn't try to reason with her. During her yelling, she said that I should just go in the boys with my son like the nannies do. So maybe I am totally in the wrong here. I never noticed that they do that, as I don't pay much attention to what others are doing when I'm with my kids. My expectation is that until kids can be on their own / sort themselves, they go with their adult. So am I the jerk for having taken my son into the girls' changing room? Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Historically, 7 years old and under meant a boy could be in a women's room. Maybe norms are different now, but no one should be giving you a problem for bringing a 4-year-old into the girls' room. Comment 2. Not the idiot. Every changing room I've been in has a variety of small children in there. It's unreasonable to expect a 4-year-old to go alone into a changing room. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, a lot has happened since the last post. After that incident in the changing room, I decided to try a different approach. I started bringing my husband along to help with the boys. He would take them into the boys' changing room while I waited outside. This worked well for a few weeks, but then my husband got a new job with longer hours, so he couldn't come with us anymore. I was back to square one, trying to figure out how to manage the changing situation without causing another scene. One day, I decided to talk to the swimming instructor about the issue. She suggested that I speak with the school administration to see if they could make any accommodations for us. I set up a meeting with the principal and explained the situation. The principal was understanding and agreed to let us use a small, unused office near the pool as a temporary changing room. This was a huge relief, and it worked well for a while. However, a few weeks later, I noticed that the office was being used more frequently for meetings and other activities, making it unavailable for us. I was back to using the family changing room, which was still often occupied and not very clean. One day, after waiting for what felt like forever, I decided to take the boys into the boys' changing room and help them as discreetly as possible. I stood near the entrance, keeping an eye on them while they changed. This seemed to work, but I still felt uneasy about it. Then one day I ran into the same mom who had yelled at me before. She saw me standing near the entrance of the boys' changing room and started yelling again, accusing me of being inappropriate. This time, I decided to stand my ground. I calmly explained that I was just trying to help my young sons and that I had tried every other option available. She didn't seem to care and continued to berate me. Other parents started to gather, and I could see that some of them were on her side, while others seemed to understand my predicament. After that incident, I started to notice that some of the other parents were giving me strange looks and whispering among themselves. I felt like I was being judged and ostracized. It was a really difficult time, and I started to dread taking the boys to their swimming lessons. I even considered pulling them out of the lessons altogether, but they loved swimming so much that I didn't want to take that away from them. One day, I decided to talk to one of the other moms who had been supportive during the previous incident. She told me that she had heard some of the other parents talking about me and that they were concerned about my behavior. She suggested that I write a letter to the school administration and the other parents, explaining my situation and asking for their understanding and support. I took her advice and wrote a heartfelt letter, detailing the challenges I faced and the efforts I had made to find a solution. The response to my letter was mixed. Some parents were sympathetic and offered their support, while others remained critical. The school administration, however, took my concerns seriously and decided to implement a new policy. They designated specific times for parents with young children to use the family changing room, ensuring that it would be available and clean when we needed it. This was a huge improvement, and it made the whole process much less stressful. Despite the new policy, I still felt the lingering effects of the previous incidents. I could tell that some parents were still wary of me, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being judged. I started to question my own actions and wondered if I had handled things differently. Maybe the situation wouldn't have escalated the way it did. In the midst of all this, I began to reflect on my own childhood and how my parents had handled similar situations. I remembered a time when I was about my son's age, and my mom had taken me to a public pool. I had a similar issue with changing, and my mom had faced the same challenges. She had always been calm and patient, never letting the opinions of others affect her. I realized that I needed to adopt the same attitude and focus on what was best for my boys, regardless of what others thought. As the weeks went by, I started to notice a change in my sons. They were becoming more independent and confident in their abilities. My 4-year-old was getting better at dressing himself, and my 6-year-old was becoming more responsible and helpful. I felt a sense of pride and accomplishment, knowing that despite the challenges, I had managed to help my boys grow and develop. Looking back, I can see that the whole experience taught me a lot about resilience and perseverance. It wasn't easy, but I learned to stand up for myself and my children, even when it felt like the world was against me. I also learned the importance of empathy and understanding, both for myself and for others. While the situation was far from ideal, it ultimately brought me closer to my boys and helped me become a stronger, more confident parent. Thank you for reading. Am I the idiot for kicking my manipulative mother out of our home and finally putting my marriage? First, I, 26-year-old male, and my wife, 26-year-old female, are newlyweds. We got our place in October of last year. In November last year, we decided to help my mom out through a tough personal situation. We both agreed that before my mom moved in, rent-free, there would be a clear understanding of how much time she needed, and that if in the time she moved in we felt differently, we would tell her we need our space back. We brought this up to my mom and she agreed that at any point we want our personal space, we can just say so and she'll move out. At first she would help out, clean, buy groceries, and cook, she insisted. Then all these things started slowly stopping until nothing was done. When these things were done, it was met with an attitude towards us. She began to be cold and distant to my wife and me, and unfortunately, it feels like we are walking on eggshells in our own home. Recently, after talking in therapy, we came up with a game plan as to how to talk to her. I approached the conversation in a de-escalation position, but it didn't go the way we had planned or any of the plans that we thought would happen. I had the conversation with her, and while I did stand firm that she needed to move out, the guilt tripping hit a little hard. Unfortunately, my point was not getting across, and it was spun as me going back on my word to help. My mom doesn't think it's fair as she has no money to move, and her family is saying that I went back on my word of helping. So Reddit, am I the jerk? To add some more clarification, the reason she moved into my home was because she was separating from my dad. She was supposed to do divorce papers and get that sorted, but she has yet to because she expects him to do it. She's also on Social Security, so she does have income coming in every month. While not a lot, still 6 months could have been spent saving, but it didn't sound like any savings was done. We did clarify to her that there would be a check-in 6 months in as to how we felt about her still living with us, so it was not new or randomly sprung up. She was 100% okay with this and said she had somewhere else to go, the family member who's telling us we should give her time. So now we're stuck because she alluded to the fact that that person can't have her forever. I also don't have any other siblings. I was an only child, basically raising my parents growing up. Someone asked if she did this to me, and the answer is yes. When I moved in every week, we paid as much as we could and was constantly asked when we were moving out because we weren't doing enough. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1, not the idiot. She lived with you for over 6 months. Not your fault, she couldn't save up. You let her live rent-free and in return you have to walk on eggshells in your own place? That is not fair. She overstayed her welcome, and it was clear that you would kick her out then. If any family member tries to give you a hard time because of that, or guilt trip you, tell them, oh, that means that you are accepting to host her from now on. How nice. Comment 2, not the idiot. You and your wife set clear boundaries and expectations with your mom before she moved in, which included the understanding that she would need to move out when you requested your space back. It's understandable that you feel uncomfortable and frustrated given the change in her behavior and the negative atmosphere it has created in your home. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for checking in. So after the last update, things have been pretty tense around here. My wife and I decided to give my mom a firm deadline to move out, which was a week from the day we talked to her. We thought it was fair considering she had agreed to our terms before moving in, but as you can imagine, it didn't go smoothly. The day after our conversation, my mom started acting even more distant. She would stay in her room most of the time and barely spoke to us. It was like living with a ghost. My wife and I tried to keep things normal, but the atmosphere was just so heavy. We were both on edge, waiting for the next confrontation. Midweek, my mom finally came out of her room and asked to talk. She said she had nowhere to go and that the family member she mentioned before couldn't take her in anymore. She also revealed that she hadn't saved any money because she was sending it to my dad, who she claimed was struggling more than she was. This was a shock to me because she had never mentioned this before. It felt like a betrayal, like she had been hiding things from us. I was furious, but also conflicted. On one hand, I felt like she had taken advantage of our kindness. On the other hand, she was my mom, and I couldn't just throw her out on the street. My wife and I had a long, heated discussion about what to do next. She was understandably upset and felt like my mom was manipulating us. I couldn't disagree, but I also couldn't shake the guilt. The next day, I decided to confront my mom about the money she had been sending to my dad. She broke down and admitted that she felt responsible for his well-being, even though they were separated. She said she couldn't bear the thought of him struggling while she was living comfortably with us. This revelation hit me hard. It made me realize that my mom was still emotionally tied to my dad, and it was affecting her ability to move on and be independent. I told her that while I understood her feelings, it wasn't fair to us. We had given her a chance to get back on her feet, and she had squandered it. I reiterated that she needed to move out by the end of the week. She cried and begged for more time, but I stood firm. It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. As the week went on, my mom started packing her things, but it was clear she had no plan. She was just going through the motions, hoping we would change our minds. My wife and I stayed strong, but it was emotionally draining. We both felt like we were being torn apart by the situation. On the last day, my mom came to me with a desperate plea. She said she had found a temporary place to stay with a friend, but needed some money to cover the rent. She promised she would pay us back once she got back on her feet. My wife was against it, but I couldn't say no. I gave her the money, hoping it would be the last time we had to deal with this. After she left, the house felt empty, but also peaceful. My wife and I finally had our space back, but the emotional toll was significant. We both felt a mix of relief and sadness. It was like a weight had been lifted, but the scars were still there. In the days that followed, we tried to get back to our normal routine. We focused on our relationship and spent time doing things we enjoyed. But the situation with my mom was always in the back of my mind. I couldn't help but worry about her and whether she would be okay. One night, my wife and I were talking about everything that had happened, and she brought up something that had been bothering her. She said she felt like I was always putting my mom's needs before ours. She understood that I felt responsible for her, but it was affecting our marriage. This was a tough pill to swallow, but she was right. I had been so focused on helping my mom that I had neglected my own family. This conversation made me realize that I needed to set boundaries, not just with my mom, but with everyone in my life. I couldn't keep sacrificing my own happiness and well-being for others. It was a hard lesson to learn, but it was necessary. As for my mom, I haven't heard much from her since she moved out. She sent me a text saying she was settling in and thanked me for the money. I hope she's doing okay, but I also know that I can't keep rescuing her. She needs to learn to stand on her own 2 feet just like I did. Thanks for reading. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.